Okay, I am live. Good evening from this part of the world that I am in. It's 7:11 where I am. How are you? Whoever is joining me or whenever you're listening to this. Hope you're well. Hope we've had a wonderful day. What's the weather like at yours? It's a bit chilly where I am. Probably about 12 degrees, which is not too bad, but at least it's chilly. Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Bokun Imokwede, and I am one of the facilitators for the Preparing for Bliss program. And tonight, I'm going to be talking about a very, very interesting topic. Um, Probably controversial, something that has been on for years. People experience this, whether um, you only got married yesterday or you've been married for 40 years. It's something that we're all faced with. So, what's the topic for this evening? Okay, again, I'll introduce myself. My name is Boko Mokwede. Thank you for joining whenever you're listening to this. And if you're live, hello. I'm not very good with this tech thing, so I won't know if anybody's there. But anyway, I'm sure I would get a hang of it at some point. Now, so this evening we're going to be talking about dealing with family influence and boundaries in marriage. Family influence and boundaries in marriage is what we're going to be talking about. So, like I mentioned earlier, this is a topic that has been here forever, and it's going to be something that we all have to deal with because we are relational beings. We always have to deal with people, we also have to deal with other individuals. So, it's definitely something that would keep coming on. So, um, where do I start? I'm going to start by saying that we definitely know that marriage brings two people together. Okay. And, but it's not just two individuals that it's bringing together, it's bringing together people of different background, culture, traditions, beliefs. And of course, it's also bringing your extended family. It's not just bringing those two people together, but it's also bringing families together. And we must not forget that families have always been a big source of support for you to get to that point where you're getting married. Um, but at the same time, those families are coming with their own challenges. So it's like when you marry somebody, you marry their strengths, you marry their weaknesses. So even though our families have been a big part of our lives, huge support, they have their positives and as well as the negative. So when two people come together, like I said, you're bringing together a lot of things, your beliefs, your traditions, your values, to now form a new nation, form your own values, agree what would work for your own home, and you know, before you kick off. Um, so today we're just going to be discussing and establishing how do we deal with that influence that is brought about by families, and how do we ensure that we establish, boundaries that are healthy in marriage so that you can actually protect your own relationship and you can still maintain some level of respectful ties with your extended, because there's no one who's going to do life alone, so you do still need family with huge support, source of support previously before you got to this stage, and they will continue to be a big source of support. So you don't just get married and say, oh, families are just no longer important or no longer, yeah, this is family on both the wife and the husband side. Yeah. Okay. Now, I want to ask a question. So, we're talking about boundaries in marriage. I want to ask a question. And the question is, what does setting boundaries mean to you in marriage? What does it mean? Yes, you might be watching a replay. And I just want to encourage you. What does setting boundary, what does it mean to you in marriage? Okay, so to me, it would mean a number of things. Setting boundaries can be as simple as personal space, and it's when you say that, you know what, even though we're married, it can be as simple as maybe when I'm upset, I need a bit of time to pull myself together. It could be as simple as that. These are some boundaries you might think that, okay, that needs to be set. Now, um, marriage itself is about two different people coming together. Like I said, two individuals coming together to form a new nation. So when you marry, yeah, you and your partner are coming together to now form an independent family unit, a new nation, just like, a proper sovereign nation. When a new nation is formed, where you have the nation of United Kingdom, the nation called Nigeria, the nation called Ghana. So each of these nations have their own rules, boundaries, and those are the things that help them to thrive. So, for instance, I can't just wake up and say, oh, if I'm not part of a particular nation, I would have to apply and find a way to get into that nation. I can't just stroll into that. That's the same way your marriage is meant to be. Your marriage is two people coming together to form a partnership to now create a new nation. And because it's a new nation, a new entity, what it means is that whilst you still have all the love and respect from where you're coming from, your new nation has to now, or the new home, or your marriage now has to be seen as a separate but very, very important thing. These are things that you need to make clear. And that's how you begin to define boundaries. It's when you're trying to define the space to say, okay, boundaries will be that for this new nation, let's use for instance or an example, team prediction. Let's just use that name. So team prediction now needs to have its own boundaries. It's almost like, in those days when they give you a piece of land and they say to you that that piece of land they're giving you would now be the new nation or the new space, you kind of need to protect it and um you kind of need to protect that new nation or the new boundaries. When you're talking about a land space where you're trying to protect it, you need to. That's the same way but this time around, it's not a physical space that you can see, but that's the same way you must look at it. That okay, if like if you're for those who are Bible scholars in those days, they would say that, oh, they're giving this land to Jacob. This land has been given to Esau, and they kind of put a boundary around that space that they've been given. The same way, even though you've come from a particular place, you're now forming, you've not been given. It's like they've given you your own piece of land to say, okay, this is now yours. You need to protect it and put boundaries, even though you have come from a larger piece. That's the same way you have to see a new nation that you're being formed, or when you come together to form a new home. So boundaries help us to actually define the space where your family can develop and become whatever it is that it needs to become without a lot of influences from other places. If there are no boundaries, it would mean that your space could be invaded. In fact, your boundaries can be as simple as putting a fence to say, okay, this is now my own plot. This is normal. But if you don't put it and you don't identify that this is where my space is or whatever, anything and anybody can actually come in. So the same way countries have borders, the same way we need to have boundaries. If not, people can come in as they like and they will go as they like, because you have not demarcated, you've not said that, oh, don't come here, or this is mine, and all that. And once a place doesn't have boundary, it begins to lose its identity and its safety. It means that it belongs to no one. It belongs to anybody. It's anybody can be there. It doesn't belong to anyone. That's what it means. So it's the same way. It might not be physical, but it's the same way that in our homes we need to, or in a marriage, there must be boundaries, like a fence in quote, so that you don't lose control, especially as your family grows. Because a new family that is being formed, as it begins to grow, you don't want to lose control. If you don't put boundaries, you will lose control. Now, setting boundaries and protecting a family. I'd already talked about the boundaries and I've tried to define boundaries. The other way is the other thing I wanted to say about boundaries is that um, it's really important in helping to protect your sanity or your well being. Clear boundaries is what helps to protect, your well being and create that environment that you really want, like I described using, creating a fence and all of that. So somebody might be thinking or asking, why do these boundaries actually matter? Why do we need to put boundaries in place? Why do we have boundaries? Boundaries are important because they act as a shield. A boundary is a form of protection from unwanted influences and from negativity, negative energy, negative influence, and all of that. Boundaries also help to um, bring about respect, so that there's respect for individual needs and preferences. It brings about respect once you know that, oh, that's their own space, that's where this is how they do things here. It brings about a form of respect. But if there are no boundaries and people don't know, oh, maybe there's a different way of doing things here and a different way of doing it there, you know people would do as they like, because there are no boundaries. Boundaries also matter because it helps to bring about harmony. You might look at it and say, harmony, how would boundaries bring about harmony? Yes, because a well defined boundary or well defined boundaries is what brings about a peaceful and harmonious environment. If there are no boundaries, there's no fence. Anything and everything will just be coming around and moving, and it won't bring about the peaceful place that you want, because you didn't put anything to demarcate that is yours or not yours. So anybody comes in and says that, oh, this is a free land or free space, they can go in as they like. So there wouldn't be any form of harmony or peace for you to have in your own home or your marriage. And as part of bringing about peace, it also helps to bring about, um, to help you to just maintain your sanity or well being, where you can, prevent you from screaming every time, go out, this thing should move out, this one should move out. Because if you have defined the boundary, people know where to, where not to step or where not to go. It gives you peace of mind, it just gives you sanity and all that. Now, I asked earlier, what are some of the examples of boundaries that you know about or that you've heard of saying? What are some, you know, types of boundaries that you've heard, or, especially when it comes to marriage? And I was saying that boundaries could be as simple as personal space boundary, where, you know, I come home and I'm upset. And at that point in time, all my husband wants to do is just invade my space, like, oh yeah, come out of it, blah blah blah, almost like trying to be that instant help. And at that point in time, I might just still need a bit of time to think through it, to say, you know what, this is where I process things, or this is where I handle things. But if somebody is in your face at that point in time, just saying, oh, no, 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 you don't need to be upset about this, it might not be giving you enough time to process it, or they might want you to resolve it now, now, now. So boundaries can be as simple as, giving space. Yeah. Boundaries could be as simple as time type of boundaries where you just need time to say from 6 a.m. to 7, I need it for meditation, for reflection, for envisioning my day. I need you to pray. I need you to do reading. I need it to exercise. It might be as simple as that. For your own personal pursuit, you might just need a bit of time. You might also need time boundaries to say, my extended family, I always use XYZ time with my family. Maybe a time when you pray together as a family or you meet as your own family. And then you tell your extended family or friends that, this particular time is dedicated to my immediate family. So time boundaries also apply. And it might just be as simple as, you know what, I want to rest for the next 1 hour. I don't want anybody disturbing or waking me up. Time boundaries. I'm just giving examples of it because I asked earlier when I started to say, what are some examples that people have seen? Another one might be that financial boundaries. Financial boundaries could be as simple as defining what you would take and what you won't take when it comes to how money is spent or shared within the family. So you set limits, you know that, okay, for on food, we must not go beyond this budget. On entertainment, we must not go beyond this budget. On giving, we must not, do you understand? So those are, financial boundaries. So, and there are different examples. I hope you've thought about them and, you do have some examples in that's coming for you. The another thing is that I want to touch on is how do we actually establish these boundaries? Because sometimes they are very tricky. So I'm going first by defining what boundaries are, telling us the different types of boundaries. Then I'm saying, how do we actually, I've tried to explain what boundaries are. So, the understanding is coming gradually. Now, somebody might be looking at it that boundaries, you can say so much about it, you can explain, you can do all that, but it's very easy to put boundaries in place, which I do agree that it's not. But at the same time, it's really important and we must learn how to establish those boundaries. Otherwise, like we described earlier on, a house without a boundary means it's probably nobody's house. Anybody can walk in, anybody can walk out. So, some of the ways we can establish boundaries is to be open about it, clear about it, communicate about it, to say this and this and this is what is acceptable, this, and be open, be clear in your communication, in your boundaries to your family members. And one of the things why I like the Preparing for Bliss marital program is because as part of the overall program, there'll be many times where you would be walking through things that will show you or teach you about boundaries. So there are three pillars in the Preparing for Bliss project. The first one is the flourishing you. The second one is the flourishing us. And the third one is the flourishing systems. In all these three, you will definitely touch on boundaries because when you're talking about yourself, you need to understand what boundaries you need to create for your own sanity. So because it's only when you flourish, you can bring that flourishing self of yours into the marriage. So there's boundaries in flourishing you. More specifically, you have boundaries in the flourishing us because at that point in time is when you are setting your family vision, mission, goals. Remember, I said that family has come from two different places to come together to now form a new nation. That new nation must have its own, it's like, let's talk about it like a physical fence where you fence it around. So your fencing of that particular land that you've been given is what we're equating to the boundaries you have to put in your own marriage. So in the flourishing us, there are boundaries you set from setting your family vision the mission, your values, those are boundaries you're beginning to put in to say, yes, I've come from here and there, but we are now coming together. In fact, your own individual values and your spouse's individual value, you're bringing it to now say, what are now our family values? So there's boundaries in there because you're creating what defines your new nation or your own space. And of course, the third one, which is the flourishing system, loads and loads of boundaries in there because that's when you'll be talking about the governing system. You talk about your immigration system, where who comes to a house? How long do they stay? When they're coming, what are the rules they need to abide by? You know, what what is the process for coming in? How many months notice or weeks or days you have to give us before you come? You can't just walk into a home. But again, some people might have open policy. It's whatever works for your home. Some people might say, you know what, we don't need anybody to announce. They can stroll into our house and stroll out anytime they want. So again, once you've defined it, that's it. That's what people would take. So there's that. And there's also what we call the domestic management system, which again tells you about the boundaries, you know, when you have you where you're already setting how your home would look. You know, some people would say, you know what, we don't want any boundary. That once people come in, they move in from the entrance of the house to the kitchen straight to everything is open plan. It might be what they like, and even to their bedrooms and everything, anybody can enter. So again, these are places where we discuss boundary as part of the program. So like I said, that's one of the reasons why, you know, for the preparing for bliss marital projects, there's a lot to learn when it comes to boundaries. There's so much that is being covered in it. So I talked about open communication as part of, you know, how you can establish boundaries. The other thing is be consistent with your boundaries. It helps because you don't want to cause confusion when, you know, today is like this. The people will be like, okay, what exactly do you want us to do? You need to be consistent. Is this our boundary? What is it? Yes, as much as, you know, just be consistent. The other thing I think I would like to say about it would be also, as much as you're consistent, there are also times where you should be able to negotiate, where you compromise, where you say that, you know what, yes, we do have this, but there are times where we need to kind of compromise or negotiate this again, but it has to be jointly agreed by both parties. And another thing is, if you know that you're struggling, you can also get help. You can get support from, you know, a counselor. If you know you're struggling, it might be that, oh, from maybe when you initially got married, or you just didn't define it and you're struggling or finding it hard to be able to know it, you can get help. And, you know, marriage counselors, therapists can actually help you put those boundaries in place, because, you know, they'll be doing it without any bias. Unlike, you know, if you've gone so deep and you're like, okay, you know what, already we made this mistake where in our home anybody and everybody enters our living room, but sorry, not living room, your own bedroom. We just realized that, okay, we want to put some boundaries in, but because, you know, familiarity, everything has gone in, it's so difficult. You know, you can seek help to be able to get, how do we put those boundaries in place. Now, you know, when I started, I was talking about marriage being is, you know, a union where people are coming together. External part, when I say external party, extended family are also coming, because it's not just husband and wife. You also have the extended family. So extended family or your family are one of the people that these boundaries will impact on. Yeah. Um my view is that for families, they are really important. And as much as we're saying we want to put boundaries in place for them, you must not forget that we're not saying cut off, because there are lots of benefits that we have in family. Remember, I don't know if you've heard this saying that says it takes a village. It takes a village to raise a child. So it's not just with you. And your village, as long as your extended family align with where your family, what your family values are, where you're going, and most likely your extended family will be part of that community or that village support system that you need, that is helping you to raise your child. Of course, nobody does life alone. So your family definitely will always remain part of you. Don't forget those cherished traditions, those memories that you've created to get together, the advice they've given you, and all of that. You can't just throw away in one go. Also, there would be involvement, in your life, whether you like it or not. It will be there. There'll be regular visits. There'll be phone calls. There'll be shared activities that you have to do. So don't take this as, oh, once we get married, the boundaries you're going to put is just a cut. No, that's not what we're saying, because there are loads of benefits in your family. You're not going to cut it off. We're only saying that you now need to put boundaries in place, healthy boundaries in place, just so that you can protect your marriage, you can protect your own home from unnecessary strain and a lot of interference. Because if you don't put those boundaries in and you leave it open, nobody knows where the limits are, nobody knows where you draw the line, then you're opening up your home to plenty interference. Yeah, so it's essential that we set healthy boundaries. And setting healthy boundaries to these families help us to, you know, it helps us to establish a very clear, you know, definition of where the limit is. It helps them to know that, yes, this new nation has just started. You also need to give it space, give it time so that it can grow, it can develop. Because if they don't, it might not be intentional, but people out of even their goodwill would begin to come in with so much that you probably don't need. So a lot of influence, subtle pressure starts to come in, either through the constant visit, unsolicited advice, you know, values that don't align with yours. You just see that. So that's why it's important that we set those boundaries to ensure that for the new nation that we just formed, or the new nation that just started, it needs time to grow, to become maybe similar to the nation you're coming for, even better. Yeah. And I already talked about it, that in the Preparing for Bliss program, there are many parts of the program that that talks about boundaries. So it's really, really beneficial that you're part of the program, or you get people to join if you're already married. In fact, I always tell people, even if you're married, that program is fit for anyone. As long as you want bliss in your home, you should take the program, honestly. So, flourishing us, the three pillars. So, flourishing you, flourishing us, and flourishing systems. In those three, it is a lot about boundaries that we'll be talking about. I already mentioned some of them. Now, what are some key places that we need to set boundaries? Key places. In the program itself, I said when you go into the details, you would come in contact with boundaries in many ways. Governance system, security and immigration, domestic management system. You'll see a lot of boundaries in that place. What are some, boundaries that we can set? Visit. Who is welcome? Who is not? How often? For how long are you staying? It's important to agree these rules with your spouse. So, for instance, you might say that um, family can visit anytime with just a phone call. Or you might say, actually, you can visit, but you have to give us enough notice. So, visit is one of the places where you can set boundaries. So, let it just be known between you and your spouse how often, for how long, what's the way that they communicate this to us, blah, blah, blah. Just agree all of that. Boundaries needs to be put in place when it comes to decision making. Otherwise, external family members, they are waiting. Once you give them go ahead, they will join. So you need to decide for major decisions, maybe about finances, where we live, the children we're having. Define what your boundaries are. Except, of course, both of you agree that you welcome their input in any decision at all, but you must decide when it comes to this decision. Nobody's coming here. When it comes to how we're raising our children, which school they go, blah, 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 you have to decide. Yeah. So, in the involvement in decision making. Otherwise, anything and everybody will be advising you on what. Yeah. Now, another thing would be that yeah, so I talked about decision making, which again links to not getting unnecessary unsolicited advice, because once you don't set that boundary, people will be telling you so unsolicited advice where you've not asked them, but they're already telling you. So you should just know where you're putting that information, or where you're going to throw it. Yeah. So I know that we will be talking about it and we're looking at it like, that's this the kind of boundaries you are going to set. But somehow, sometimes when you're in the marriage, it's not necessarily as easy as black and white. Because imagine a scenario where the husband's family or parents, let's say, or maybe let's just use, I don't want to use the husband's mom. Everybody uses husband's mom, and I'm going to be the husband's mom one day. So I don't want that. I'm only joking. Okay, let's say it's usually the moms that get involved. They are the ones that want to know. I want to dig deep. Honestly, so as I'm trying not to use the husband's mom. It's just the one that keeps coming back. Okay, let me use the woman's mom now this time around. So let's say the wife's mother is always advising the couple about this is how you should raise your children. You know, this is when they grow to this age, you must tell them this and tell them, you can appreciate that support. But again, if you're not careful, it can become overwhelming, can become confusing. And you have to find a way of passing that message to say that, you're grateful that they care, because really some of these things is just because people care. That's why they're trying to. But you must find a very, very respectful way of communicating to them that whilst you're grateful for the advice, you probably also need space to parent or to raise your own children in the way that aligns with what you've defined in your family. Because if you don't, you just see that the wife's mother will keep telling you, even up until what time you should be picking the children from school, which, how the teachers should teach them. That's it. Sometimes people go a mile and it just doesn't end. It's just a never ending um, journey. So the best way to do is to set the boundaries early enough to know that, um, this is how we want to do it. This is how we want to raise our kids. This is what decisions we would like to make. And once you already let them know that, okay, when it comes to certain decisions, we're not going to be taking any, we're putting boundaries in place so that it's not that everybody can get involved. Once they know that, when it comes to this, don't go there because they will not allow you to make. So people would, it will be defined. But honestly, that's something you need to agree with your husband, your spouse, early enough. So I just talked about the kind of boundaries that you need to set. You also need to set boundaries around your children. It's really important. The moment your family begins to grow, it's important, because if you don't define that, people will throw anything at you. You need to protect your children from inappropriate or external influences. Because if people have raised their own kids in a particular way, they're going to use the same way, the same trick to come at you. But you must define it, protect your own children. Yeah. Um, because listen to things like, oh, why is this child suddenly adding weight and all that can become a big issue. You might not know it until you know the child begins to feel insecure. Because nowadays there's a lot of learning on words that are kind, what's words that are acceptable for people to use, words that are not allowed to use. Previously in those days, you hear when I was growing up, you hear things like, "Yeah, that child is too fat, that child is too," but now I know that people are so. Those are some of the things you need to protect children from. Or some people will just be giving advice that they've not been asked for to your children. They'll tell them to do, what they think is applicable, what might not necessarily align with your family values or vision or what you want to do. You know, and if you don't protect those children, the world now is too what's the word I'm looking for? Is There's just so much going up out there that that would, even for the teachers, there needs to be boundaries. What's acceptable? What can they say to your child? For your domestic staff, what's acceptable, what's allowed for your chauffeurs, your drivers, people who work for you, what are they allowed to work at, when it comes to your child? What are the boundaries you're putting in place? There are part of people that can influence, you understand? So yeah. um and what else? I think that's kind of it I'm trying to say on how we can set. So I talked about the children, I talked about unsolicited advice, and um, what's the time now? Okay, I've got how many more minutes? I'm just checking. Okay, now I want to now specifically address some things about in-law issues because I already talked about extended family. When you're talking about boundaries that we put in place and influence of family, but one of the key places that sometimes people have issues will be in-laws. In-laws because I'm trying to word this. It's a relationship that you need to navigate carefully so that it doesn't bring about conflict because for both parties you're like an addition to the family. You see what I mean? It's like you've come in to join this new family and you need to be really really mindful of those relationships that they are not misconstrued as, oh, external person that's now come into this family now making laws and all of that. So it's really really it's really really important that we learn to navigate in-law issues. Yeah, it can be one of the most challenging, right from picking of dates, what to wear, from the wedding ceremony. The dynamics can just, blow out of proportion. So those are very, very delicate relationships that you need to really learn about, how to manage them. Um, In-laws come with a lot of expectations. They come with traditions. They come with their opinions. So it's about finding that delicate balance, if I can use that word, yeah, or that form of integration where you're still respecting your spouse's family, but again, safeguarding your new nation. It's a very delicate yet important relationship. So there are quite a number of challenges, that could occur, and it would be based on, like I said, values that they have in their own home. How this is how we do things in our family. This is how we've always done it in our family. Once you marry and the firstborn, once they give birth on the 8th day, we are doing naming, we are doing family traditions, and so Your own might be, especially, sometimes people marry from different cultures. Someone from Yoruba might marry someone from Igbo, and how they do things might be different, might be so different that, you're it's beginning to impact on how you see. So, you know, it's like I said, very delicate. Um, Things as simple as holidays or how we manage the house, you'll be shocked. Some families will say, we've always spent Christmas together. How can they now say that once because they're married now and all that? Our son will no longer come for Christmas. Our daughter will no longer come for Christmas. Always go to this place every time. So there's a lot to get ready for. Sometimes there's a lot of over involvement in some in-laws that if you're not careful, don't put the boundaries in place. Some in-laws get so involved in the couple's personal affairs, from finances to parenting. Some will even follow them to enter bedroom to say, okay, how are they doing? How many times and all that. Honestly. So that's why you need to put boundaries in place early enough, because over involvement can get, can be the other of the day. It might be your sister-in-law, it might, depending on how close they were to either the son or the daughter that is now your own spouse. Another thing that could, from in-laws angle, with comparison and criticism. Ah, when my son did his own, they didn't do this. Da, 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 da. When my daughter did this, no, that's not how they were raising their own children. They sent their children to this and that. Comparison and criticism. They start to say that can bring about a lot of tension. It can bring about even that feeling of inadequacy. Do you understand? Because it might be that you're not able to afford certain things. So those are things you really, really need to start watching out for to say. When it comes to in-laws, these are ways that and sometimes they're not doing it consciously. It's a very unconscious thing that they're doing, because just like, no, how can my brother not come home for Christmas? Because he's not married. He can't say he wants to go and spend Christmas in so and so. He wants to not travel to those little things. They can bring about a huge, difference. So that's some of the challenges from in-laws. The other thing might be that loyalty form of struggle. Who am I loyal to? I've heard in many cases where the mothers, again, mother-in-laws, I'm sorry, if you're mother-in-law and watching me, I'm going to be one in the future by God's grace. So it would be a case of loyalty between me as your mother and you as the what's it called, your family of origin, to your new nation. It'll be, go and choose between your mother and I, or something, or go and choose between your father and I, if it's the husband, or whichever way. They can be torn in between the two. But the thing is, you see, those roles and relationships are different. The space of a mother is not the same space as a wife, and that has to be clear. The space of a father is not the space of the husband. It has to be clear. So once the roles are clear, there should not be a question of loyalty. Ooh, you want to now choose between your mother and sometimes when you watch or listen to some of the things happening in some marriages, you're thinking to yourself, how did we get here? So those are some things, these are some, things that happen. These are some of the challenges, but you just need to be aware and get yourself ready. Make sure that you don't fall into, by you defining boundaries, by okay, as a mother, this is where your limit is, as a wife as well, within, you've agreed within yourself and all of that. So I think lastly, I'm going to just be sharing some strategies for, you know, for us to have that positive type of relationship when it comes to extended families, in-laws, or external influence generally. First one I'm going to say is, please start from a place of understanding, especially when it comes to in-laws. Start from a place of understanding. Acknowledge that your in-laws are coming from a place of love and concern. Even though sometimes they approach my same, are you coming too much? Or, but try to understand their motives before you react. Almost like try and look at things from their own eyes, from their own perspective. Was you, how are you likely to behave? What are you likely to want to do? Maybe if it's your brother or your sister or your son or your daughter that is married. The other thing that you can use that is really important for you to have positive relationship when it comes to your in-laws, extended family, is to be open with your spouse. Between the two of you, make sure that there's a clear understanding between each other. Nothing comes in. Agree. How do you want to handle in-laws when it comes to this and that? How important? Who is going to stand up for what? Let it be clear who is going to be doing what. Yeah? Be very, very clear. Open between the two of you. Make sure that the communication between both of you, it's clear, it's crisp. You both agree and understand. And yeah, then the other thing is resolving, when it comes to resolving conflicts with your in-laws, because the truth is these things will arise whether we like it or not. Those are some of the ways, because it's like even in this program, in the preparing for bliss program, there is a part of conflict where we talk about the different strategies for conflict and understanding. So the same way, there'll be times where it feels like there's conflict, whether you're directly involved or something. There's always been, so you need to find a way to resolve conflict with your in-laws. It has to be done carefully so you don't damage relationship with your family, because the conflict you have with your own family that you're coming from will be totally different kind of conflict that have, because conflict with in-laws, it stems from somewhat, because people talk a lot about sibling rivalry, but sometimes there's already sibling rivalry. Now imagine with that extended sibling rivalry, you're now having a spouse added to it. So that's some of the reasons why it's a bit more complicated. The dynamics are slightly much more different. So, with resolving conflict when it comes to in-laws, it includes a lot of respect, clear communication, and sometimes a lot of compromise. Yeah. To resolve some of these things, when it comes to resolving conflicts, when it comes to your in-laws, some things that you want to be careful and be really, really mindful is that sometimes when it comes to in-laws, especially, you have to choose your battles. It's not every disagreement or no, that you must turn into a conflict. Decide which one is going to be worth my time. Is it what Otherwise, most of them just let it go. Look at the bigger picture. Don't use every single thing. Oh, this one didn't call me. This one didn't greet me. Do you know that this person sometimes the way she talks to me is disrespectful? Just choose your battle. The other thing I think is worth noting is that even generally when it comes to conflict, rather than addressing or blaming a person, let's address the issue. So instead of always saying, you are the one, always you say, oh, maybe sometimes when this happens, try and use it that this is the way you feel, or this is when this situation happens, this is how you feel, or this. So, yeah, don't personalize it. Just try to address the issue, not the person. I think that's what I'm trying to go to. And another thing is be solution minded, not doing the blame game. Let's talk about what's the way out, what's the solution, what's the way forward. Not if you didn't do this, you keep talking about, so that you're positively moving forward and both parties can feel that, oh, there's mutual respect, you know because for instance, your father-in-law might be upset that I don't get to see my grandchildren enough, so instead of you going, uh, blame or doing this thing, you could just look for ways to say, oh, this is why, maybe because of work and this and that. But rather than you focusing on the problem and trying to blame, let's look for solution. You can say, you know what, for what you have said, okay, out of the schedule, you know what, I'm going to make sure that I schedule maybe, I don't know, it might be once every 6 months that you're able to find some time, or arrange for grandpa and the grandchildren to meet in a place. Just find ways when it comes to in-laws. That's the truth. Because, it can be tricky. It's a very, very tricky relationship. You must remain calm and respectful when it comes to your in-laws, because generally you are um with the in-laws, like I said, because of the way the relationship dynamics is, you know, you really, really need to be careful when it comes to in-laws. So you must be calm, respectful, don't be confrontational, because, like I said, you've been adopted into that home. So you must make sure that you don't have unnecessary emotional outbursts. Sometimes it feels like those things are, that it's impossible for you not to do them. But for you to make sure that your resolutions are quicker and faster, you want to make sure that um, you try to quickly cool things off in a calm and respectful way. And then, lastly, when it comes to in laws, if you've not listened or heard anything I said, please let your spouse take the lead. Because in most cases, the spouse whose family is involved in this, when it comes to my own family, I will take the lead. I will front for on behalf of the family. When it comes to his family, he should front on behalf of his family, so that, you know, because I am from my family, it's easier for them to, for us to sort ourselves, or get things sorted within ourselves, rather than me exposing my spouse to my family and throwing him under the bus. So I have to always be the one to take the lead when it comes to my family, and hide my husband behind. When it is his family, it's going to be the same way. He takes the lead and kind of shields me. Yeah. Always let your spouse take the lead. So when it comes to things around his mother, his sister, his father, his brothers, his cousin, always let him take the lead. I've had several examples in my own marriage that I can share. And honestly, I can tell you of a fact, it works. And the same way, when it comes to my family, anybody wants to say anything about my husband, I take the lead. Come and talk to me. When you talk to me, then I'll let you know whether, do you understand? That's the same way. So that helps to save so much. Probably saves about 90%. Once the two of you, like I said, make sure that between the two of you, there's a mutual agreement. Once there's that agreement, when it comes to your spouse, extended families, in-laws, and everything, be sure that that won't be an issue, because whoever the spouse is of that family, whose family is involved, once they take the lead, it's a lot easier. So, on that note, I would like to say a big thank you if you joined us, or if you're watching the replay. Thank you. Let's hear your comments, questions. What else do you think, we could have covered? What else is coming to you or coming for you in terms of dealing with in-laws or external influence or boundaries in marriage? What else is coming for you? But for this evening, these were the things that came to mind. I just thought I'll touch on the boundaries, how to keep healthy boundaries, what boundaries are, and of course now discussing the almighty in-laws and how we should be handling them. So on that note, it's good night from myself, and I hope to speak to you soon. Thank you very much.